So we recently had our first official look at Borderlands 4 with a Borderlands 4 trailer that not only had some cinematic and story-based stuff, but it also had some gameplay. So I want to go over some of the most important parts of this trailer and also go over some of the parts that I think a lot of people have been skipping over or not really paying attention to, because I think there's some really important piece of information we could get from this trailer that aren't as obvious as you would originally think. And the first and one of the most important things I want to go over about this trailer is the theming. Because if you go through the entirety of this trailer, the more cinematic story stuff and through the gameplay, there was almost nothing that was comedy based. Pretty much all of the theming based around this was a bit more of a more serious tone, even going through the gameplay. But at the start of the trailer with the more cinematic elements, it was a much darker, more serious tone than we have had in previous Borderlands games, especially from something like Borderlands 3. The start of this trailer is basically a psycho army fighting this other army of aliens that we don't exactly know what faction they are, with a glimpse at what is seeming to be one of the main villains of Borderlands 4, which we also later learned is called the Timekeeper. And even when looking past the cinematic portion of the trailer and going into the gameplay, there's pretty much nothing in the gameplay portion that is comedic. All of it has a bit more of a mature tone. The only thing that is even slightly comedic or has a lighter tone is what looked to be one of the bosses, which was a legless psycho breakdancing. That was pretty much it, which is something that I very much want with the Borderlands franchise. And I think most other people who are excited for Borderlands 4 and other Borderlands games, I think very much want the game to go in a more mature direction. There's obviously always going to be that kind of toilet humor that Borderlands is always known for. They went way too far with that in the most recent entries to the franchise, and as this franchise just continues to get older, a majority of the player base and fans of Borderlands are now older. Most of us started playing the original Borderlands games when we were in our teens or even younger, so as the wider player base and fans of Borderlands get older, they should probably make the game a bit more serious and a bit more grown up. And I think that's easily one of the smartest things they could do to improve the Borderlands franchise going from Borderlands 3 to Borderlands 4. That was one of the biggest complaints of 3. The story, a lot of the characters, how comedy was kind of forced into basically everything in Borderlands 3. I think removing a lot of that comedy, toning all of that comedy back, and just adding in more serious tones and a more serious, potentially more dark theme. I think that's the perfect direction for Borderlands 4 to go in. And one of the biggest discussions around this trailer is the 4 new Vault Hunters. So we got to look at all 4 of the new Vault Hunters. We've also gotten it confirmed that these are all new characters, but one of the biggest criticisms of this trailer and of the game so far is that these 4 Vault Hunters are kind of boring and bland. I think in general, a lot of the fans of the franchise kind of feel they're just kind of mid and bland. Some people have said they just look horrible. I don't think they look horrible. I do share the opinion that they are a bit bland, but I do think there's going to be a handful of reasons for that. But first off, we have the 4 Vault Hunters. On the left, we have kind of a Zane-coded character who has kind of an exoskeleton on him. We also get another look at him in the trailer, which it seems like he has these cool-looking energy blades, and he has this hologram mask that goes over his face when he's in that mode. So presumably it's like his action ability where he just gets these cool energy blades and something built around tech for him. Then we have the new Siren, and her tattoos are purplish pink, which is interesting because the different colors of Siren tattoos are actually pretty meaningful within the lore of Sirens. Then we have the really big bulky guy who does have one like cybernetic arm, who also seems to be very armored up. We also get to see him later in the trailer, or what we think is him, and his action ability seems to be to pull out 2 different elemental axes, one that looks frost and one that looks fire. He does throw one of them, but presumably you would also be able to melee with them. And then the 4th character character is the smallest, and we really don't get to see anything specific from her throughout the trailer. We get to see her shooting a gun, but nothing specific to her character design. Now, she does have kind of these big poofy pants with these different tubes going in them, which could mean a bunch of different things. And in my opinion, she's probably either some type of maybe a bit more of a supportive class, or because of her stature and what size she is, she may also just be a very fast class, and that may also be why kind of pants she's wearing are so big and puffy with these tubes. Maybe those help her speed up. Maybe she can jump higher with them or something, or maybe she just can move very fast. But all in all, one of the biggest criticisms is that these characters are really bland. But what's also very interesting is that looking at the trailer, a lot of the colors in this trailer, especially when looking at the Vault Hunters, are really grayed out and less vibrant. But if you go to the Steam page of Borderlands 4, they have a GIF of showing the 4 Vault Hunters, and the coloring is much more vibrant and has better lighting, and the characters look substantially less bland when there is good coloring and good lighting on them. In fact, someone on one of the Borderlands Reddits did make a comparison from the trailer compared to the image on the Steam page, and they are kind of night and day when you have better coloring and better lighting. It seemed really washed out in the YouTube trailer for some reason. So I do think when people start to see that comparison, these characters will look a lot less bland, but I do also think they may have specifically wanted to make these characters, or at least the first look of these characters, look a bit more bland, because there may just be a lot more player customization. Because going throughout the franchise from 1 to 2 to 3, they've added a lot more character customization, and then going into Tiny Tina's Wonderlands, you obviously create your own character and you have a lot more customization than any previous game, and I think that's going to continue. They will probably have a ridiculous amount of character customizations that you can obviously make your characters look a lot more interesting and a lot different, but I do also think there's a chance that they add some amount of character customization when first choosing the Vault Hunter you want to play. Obviously, it is a set bespoke character, but I very much could see that there is some amount of smaller customizations you could do that are kind of being built upon Tiny Tina's Wonderland system. So while I do think these characters are a bit bland, I think the better coloring and lighting helps a lot. And I do also think there's going to be a lot of customization. And I think it's also just going to help a lot. Once we actually start playing the game, we get to hear these characters' voices, we get to play with them more and understand the characters more. And I think that's where a lot of the interesting elements come from these Vault Hunters anyway, including in all the previous games. Now, another really interesting part of this trailer is something that I don't think a lot of people have talked about, because to make this an interesting part of the trailer, you have to know some other information we've gotten as well. So at a part of the trailer, your Vault Hunters are kind of going up a ridge and they see this massive overlook to like a massive city, to the big cracked moon in the sky. And there's just this massive vista, which normally in Borderlands games, you wouldn't be able to go and like explore all of the areas. You would see a bunch of really cool areas that are off map or just kind of building the theming of that area. But Borderlands has generally been much more confined to specific areas and not as open. But because of some developer interviews, we know Borderlands 4 is going to be somewhat close to fully open world. We also know that specifically Randy Pitchford in some interviews around this time has also said that everything you see in this shot you can go to. It's open and freely explorable. Now I'm going to be doing another video going over this information in much more detail because there's a lot of very interesting elements to this, but this shot in the trailer combined with the additional information we've gotten from developers is showing that you're literally able to go and explore everything you see in this vista, and you're able to do it without any loading screens. It was also mentioned that you're actually able to explore the moon in this image as well, and I think this is going to be a pretty big departure from other Borderlands games. Now, as I mentioned, I'm going to do another video going over all this information. They did also mention that while this is going to be much more open, there's still some stuff they're not doing because it's Borderlands, so it doesn't sound like it's going to be fully just completely an open world, but it does sound like it's going to be pretty close close to that. And I think that's going to be a very big mix-up when going from previous Borderlands games, but also when going into kind of the new movement and some of the new elements that are seeming to be in Borderlands 4. I think it's going to be very interesting as well. Now, the final thing I want to go over with this trailer is some of the new gameplay we got to see. Now, first off, we are getting grappling hooks. Presumably, this is going to be every character. We get to see one character using it. This also seems to be the really big, bulky guy because he uses his left arm, which is his cybernetic arm that's yellow in the first-person view, as we also get to see him previously in the trailer. His cybernetic arm is yellow, but he grapples to what seems to be a grapple point. So it does seem like even though we're getting grappling hooked, it may only be to specific points. But what's also very interesting, besides massively increased movement that something like grappling can bring, we also get to see some of his other toolkits. Now, first off, he throws what looks to be like a gravity grenade that's sucking everything in. But what's really interesting is this, first off, doesn't seem to be a specific ability for this character. It seems to be, this is more of a grenade, but it looks to be some type of knife that he's throwing that creates this grenade, which is just something that would be new and interesting for a grenade. It would probably make grenades just be much more easily usable. You can throw a knife and stick it into an object or into a character or something, and that's just easier to use. Potentially a new weapon manufacturer that has these new type of grenades. But we also get to see this character use what seems to be their action ability, which they create these two big axes. The right side one being an ice axe, the left side one being a fire axe. These are also created by these little robots. If you slow down the footage, he has these kind of little helper robots that come together to form these two axes. He then throws one of the axes, but it also looks like the other axe goes away. So presumably with this action skill, you spawn these axes and you either get to choose to throw one, or you would probably get to choose to use these as melees. It also makes sense that the massive character is somebody who has these big axes and just gets to go swing them at people. Hopefully this also means that we're getting some of the increased melee elements of combat that we got with Tiny Tina's Wonderlands, which I just think is a part of previous Borderlands games that just hasn't been used enough, allowing melee to be a bigger part of combat in general for the game. I think is just good for more interesting and better combat. But that's the main things I want to go over for an overview of this first look at Borderlands 4. I'm pretty excited, especially as somebody that is definitely much more focused on like the combat and build crafting of Borderlands. I'm very excited. Borderlands 3 was very good with those elements. And if they can get the story in a much better area, they can make it much more mature, maybe a bit darker, and massively reduce the amount of just kind of forced in comedy. I think the game could be very good and one of the best in the franchise so far. But that's all I want to go over, so thanks for watching.